Okay, so it is time for another review. And today we are going to be reviewing Stephen King's The Bazaar Stories of Bad Dreams. If you have not seen any of my reviews before, they are split into two sections, a non-spoiler and then a spoiler version. So if you have not read this book and you want to, don't worry, we start off with a non-spoiler where I give you 3 cons and 3 pros about the book. Then we go into the spoiler version where I tell you a little bit about the plot and my thoughts and feelings spoiler-wise. So let's get into the non-spoiler version of this book. Again, this is called The Bazaar Stories of Bad Dreams, and it is by Stephen King. This is not a standard novel. In fact, it is a compilation of 20 mini stories. So that's going to make this review a little bit harder to do, but that's okay. We can get there. Con number 1 of this book is that not all the books were amazing. In fact, I rated all of the books, and I'm going to talk about what my ratings were for all of the mini stories in this book in this spoiler version, half of this review, but not all of the stories were good. Some of them were downright awful, and I can say that. I can say that to Stephen King, and I can say it to you guys, because I said I'll always be honest with you guys. Some of them were just terrible, and that I just either wasn't the right target audience for the book, or for the story, or it just wasn't written well in my opinion, and that's okay. My second con for this book is the fact that it is I almost want to call it a compendium of mini stories, because you don't get the flow that you would with a standard novel. This compendium, if you'll allow me to call it that, is 495 pages. Which, let me have my gripe about that just for a moment. A tome is 500 pages long. This thick, hefty fella is 495 pages. Couldn't we have 5 more pages? Like, seriously? I've had worse, you guys. I've read books that are 498 pages long. It's like, couldn't you add 2 more pages? Like, come on. But anyway, it's 495 pages long of 20 mini stories, and so you don't get the standard flow you would with a novel, where if you really get into a story, it doesn't keep going. You're moving on to another story, and so there were times where I found it hard to focus reading this because I couldn't be fully invested in everything that I was reading because I was going over to another story every so often. So that made it a tough read for me. My third con about this book is that the majority of the books in here are not scary at all. Yep, they're just not. And I've come to realise, and I hope no one takes this personally, especially Mr. King himself, but for me, Stephen King is a contemporary writer who places a sprinkling of horror here and there. Now, I'm well aware that Stephen King writes more than horror. He writes horror stories, he writes science fiction stories, which I only found out today. He also writes fantasy stories, which I'll be reading a fantasy story of his very soon. You'll find out more about that very soon too. But when I see that the genre horror is placed next to a story, I expect to be horrified, terrified, disgusted, something like that. And the majority of these stories did none of that for me. That's not to say they weren't good stories, but it just didn't fit the brief, if that makes sense. So that was a letdown. But now let's talk about the 3 pros that I have about this book, which are, number 1, there were 2 scary stories in this book. I'm just trying to remember 2. Yeah. There were 2 scary stories in this book that were scary to me. Not scary enough for me to have to keep my light on at night, but yeah, it was much less, oh my god, I'm freaking out, and much more, oh, here we go. So it was just more exciting than the others, I suppose. And one of those is called, I'm just going to get the name for you, The Little Green God of Agony. Oh my goodness. If you want a scary story, read The Little Green God of Agony. And especially for these current times where we are going through the coronavirus pandemic, you want a scary story that's relevant to these times? Read The Little Green God of Agony. Oh my god, it was just perfect. Anyway, because part of the plot revolves around illness. So, so it worked. My second pro for this compendium is that Stephen King is a really good writer, and the writing style is indeed very easy to read, but that's not my point. I mean that he writes some really amazing stories, some that don't necessarily scare me, but they are a pleasure to read, an absolute pleasure to read, and I certainly enjoyed them. And my third pro for this book is the variety of this book. This is said to be a horror compendium, because it's a compendium. It's not a novel, it's a compendium, okay? This is said to be a horror compendium, but other people have brought this up too. I only found this out today that others have said this, but it does make sense. I wouldn't call this a horror. I'd call it a horror plus a sci-fi plus a fantasy plus a this plus that. It's an all-rounder Stephen King. And I think the confusion lies within the title, The Bizarre Stories of Bad Dreams. And so when you hear that title, you think, oh, it's going to be scary. And we've even got a picture of death right there, if you can see him. So, it's easy to think, oh, this is going to be scary. No, it's not. But there are so many genres that are explored in this book, and that made it more of an exciting read because each story was literally pick and mix. I had no idea what I was going to get, so I did really appreciate that. So all in all, I end up giving this book 3 stars. Sorry about the glare. I end up giving this book 3 stars out of 5, and I really did enjoy it. The last Stephen King book that I read was Pet Sematary. You can check out my review in the reviews playlist of that one, and I reviewed that earlier this month, in week 1 in fact, and I gave that 2 stars. This one got 3, so who knows? Maybe the next Stephen King book I read, it will receive 4 stars. Who knows? But that is where we are going to leave the non-spoiler version for this review. So if you are leaving us before the spoiler version, thank you so much for sticking around. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday and reviews in between. And I'll see you again very soon. Mwah, and happy reading to you. For those of you who are sticking around, we'll be right back with the spoiler version of The Bizarre Stories of Bad Dreams by Stephen King. Don't go away. And welcome back. Welcome back to the spoiler version of this book, Stephen King's The Bizarre Stories of Bad Dreams. Dun, 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 right? I feel like we need that music in the background. But anyway. So, we are now in the spoiler version section of this review, which means I normally would take you through the plot of the book. And I have done that with each review so far, and I'm going to continue to do it with each review after this one. But because this is a compendium of 20 mini-stories, that's just not going to be possible for many and varying reasons. It will take way too long to explain each and every single one of them. Despite the fact this is a spoiler version of the review, it will take way too long to go through all of them. So what I am going to do is I have printed out my list of the ratings that I've given all of the mini-stories in this book, and I'm going to tell you what they are and why I gave them that rating. So, the first, and we're going through the book in chronological order here. The first book in the compendium is Mile 81, and I gave that mini-story 4 stars. Now, the reason I did this is because there are scary moments in that story. Not moments that they fully freaked me out, but hey, for Stephen King, I was really, really happy. And considering this was the first mini-story of the compendium, I thought this is going to be an amazing read and all the books are going to scare me. Not so, but certainly the first one absolutely did. And from my little memory of Mile 81, it is a book about a car that is alive, that basically kills people that touch it, and it kills them in a really gruesome way. And I'm not really about this kind of stuff, certainly not on TV or in movies, but in books, yay, it's a horror. I will take that, Mr. King, 4 stars. Book number 2, Perfect Harmony, 3 stars. I didn't write anything extra, it's just 3 stars. Book number 3, Batman and Robin Have an Altercation, 2 stars. This is a book about a a father who's in a nursing home who's losing his mind. His son takes him out for the day, and they're revisiting memories. The reason why it's called Batman and Robin Have an Altercation is because when the child was younger, he and his then father, who wasn't in a home, went out Halloween trick-or-treating. Can I talk? Sorry, one night, and they dressed up as Batman and Robin respectively. At the end of the book, the child gets into a fight with a biker who they're in an accident, but the biker was at fault, and the biker starts bashing the heck out of the child, even though the father is, well, he's not all there anymore. His amnesia's so far gone, and there are a lot of other things, like he's not in a good way at all. The father gets out of the car and bashes up the bikie guy, and so that was really good, and that's why I got 2 stars rather than 1, but otherwise I did not enjoy that read. Book number 4, The Dune, I gave 2 stars. Now, I did not enjoy the story at all, which is such a shame, and I know that you shouldn't grade a story based on the narrator, but yes, I was, while reading this book, listening to the audio version on Audible, and the narrator of that particular story, because each mini story had a different narrator, the narrator of that particular story is none other than Edward Herman, the late Edward Herman, may he rest, who is from the TV show Gilmore Girls. He played the role of Richard Gilmore. He's done many other things as well. But when I'm not reading, if I'm watching a show, I'm currently going back and forth between reading and watching Gilmore Girls. So it was amazing to watch Richard Gilmore and then listen to a book done by Richard Gilmore. So for that reason alone, instead of 1 star, The Dune got 2 stars. Bad Little Kid is the 5th mini-story, and that was an amazing one. Long story short, it's about this little kid who's taunting this guy, and he taunts him throughout his life, and finally the guy ends up getting revenge. The kid's not really a kid, he's more like a demon, or at least he comes across that way. It's written in a way that I believe he's a little demon, like literally a demon, and yeah, the guy that's tortured throughout his whole life ends up getting his revenge in the end. It was really well done. It deserved the 5 stars that it received. Book number 6, excuse me, is called A Death, and it received 4 stars. I said it would have been 5, but I didn't agree with how the ending was done. I really don't remember what it was about, but, oh, yes I do. Yes, I do. This was a book about a guy who was accused of raping and murdering a girl who was sent to the shops to spend a silver coin to buy something. I don't remember what it was, but anyway. And there's a reason why I'm telling you all of that detail. The guy that's arrested claims his innocence throughout the entire book, and I do strongly believe that he's not guilty. But anyway, he ends up getting hung, and he ends up getting tried, found guilty, ends up getting hung. The following day, warning, graphic moment coming up here, but I can't describe it any other way, so this is going to be graphic. The following day at the mortuarium, or whatever you call it, the guy that does the autopsy found the silver coin in the accused's leavings, shall we say, to keep it as graphic-less as possible. And so therefore he committed the crime. I say, nay sir, that's not how it happened. This is a horror, and anyone could have planted that stuff there while the autopsy guy wasn't there. But anyway, apparently that is how it happened, and he was the killer. Nay sir, nay sir, nay sir. Anyway, so that would have received 5 stars from me. I just disagreed, wholeheartedly, strongly disagreed with the ending. Book number 7 is called The Bone Church. It received 1 star, but that's not surprising. I'm not a target audience for a poem, and that was a poem, so I just didn't like it. Book number 8, Morality, received 4 stars. I didn't like the ending, but the plot was fascinating. Book number 9, Afterlife, received 4 stars. Again, didn't like the ending, but the plot was fascinating. Afterlife is Have you seen the film? Oh, sorry, no, the show. The Good Place. If you have, yeah, you get the idea. Basically, this guy dies and he ends up going to, well, in this guy's case, he ends up going to Limbo, Dead Girls Detective Agency. Read that book last month. Um, and once he arrives at Limbo, he basically comes across this gatekeeper. That's what I'm going to call him. And the gatekeeper says to him, you can go in the left door, and if you go through the left door, you will repeat your life over again exactly how you've just lived it. Or you can go through the right door and cease to exist. And those are your two options. So what we find out is that no matter what happens, if you go through the left, you will live your life exactly the same way. You might have moments of, what do you call them, like flashbacks or something, but you will not remember having lived it, and you will make all the same mistakes. You can't change anything. It will all just happen exactly the same way. So do you exactly repeat everything you've gone through, or do you cease to exist? And the guy ended up choosing to repeat his life over again, and the book ends with him having been born and the mother looking down at him going, oh, I've got a beautiful baby. You know, it's the life's beginning again. I didn't like the ending, but I loved the world building as such, as far as how Limbo was working in this story. I really did appreciate that. Book number 10 was It received 3 stars, and my response to is ugh. Basically, Stephen King said that he was being asked to write a short story for Kindle. And I'm not a Kindle person. I like reading physical books, clearly. So Kindle's certainly not for me. And Kindle's not something that was for Mr. King either. And he doesn't like to write books in order to, you know, help advertise a product. And he was saying that in the intro, and I really appreciate that. I just did not like the book. But it still got 3 stars. It was okay, but it just wasn't my favourite. Book number 11, Herman Woke is Still Alive, 2 stars. And my little comment there is, what a boring idea for a horror. Number 12, Under the Weather, 3 stars. The ending was so meh. It was. So Under the Weather is basically the story about a guy, he's married, his wife is in bed with him when the clock goes off in the morning. He turns the alarm clock off because he thinks no need to, wake the wife up. She's not feeling well. So he writes some notes and leaves them around the house for her, like, have a nice day, love, and all this beautiful stuff. Goes off to work, comes home, she still hasn't gotten out of bed, and he goes, oh, poor thing, she must still be feeling even worse. And then he checks her pulse and she's dead. I just found it boring. Number 13, Blockade Billy, 1 star. Blockade Billy is a book about baseball, and I'm not going to say any more than that. You lost my interest the moment that I knew it was about baseball. I did read the whole story. I just did not find it appealing. 1 star. 14, Mr. Yummy, 4 stars. It was not horrific, but I very much enjoyed the LGBTIQ plus plot and seeing an LGBTIQ plus genre book written by Stephen King. I really appreciated that. Tommy, 5 stars. Now, that was a story that needed to be told, and that's what I wrote, a story that needed to be told. It revolves around someone who I believe died of the AIDS virus, and he's in the coffin, and his friends are talking about, his life and were his wishes respected and that kind of thing as to the kind of funeral that he wanted or compared to what his family wanted. I just thought it was a story that needed to be told. So 5 stars for that one. Story 16, the best book in the whole compendium. It is called The Little Green God of Agony. Oh my God. I'm not going to spoil this for you. I'm just going to say you have to read this book. It is a book about a virus and it is amazing. You gotta read this. This is my idea of horror, Mr. King. Thank you very much. 5 stars. That Bus is Another World is book number 17 in the compendium. It received 4 stars. It was a good plot, but it wasn't scary. Book number 18 was, I don't know how to say this, Obitus? It's obituary. Oh, sorry. Obits. Obits, sorry. And it was 5 stars. Such a great plot. Really enjoyed and would even consider a reread. Yes, that's how much I loved it. This book revolves around a guy who does obituaries for a newspaper that really takes the mickey out of everyone. It's the newspaper called the Circus newspaper. But anyway, he asks his boss for a raise because his obits section is doing really well. He's a wonderful comedian. The boss says no, and she just continues to offer him a cough drop. Yeah, serious Dolores Umbridge vibes there. But anyway, saying, no, I'm not going to do that. But would you like a cough drop? Would you like a cough drop? Kind of thing. But anyway, so he goes back to his desk, and filled with rage, he decides to, just to get out of his system, he makes up an obit for her saying how she died sucking on one of her cough drops, or choking on one of her cough drops. And wouldn't you know it, in a couple of hours later, she dies. And he ends up writing another obit about someone else, and then they die. And then he clicks and works out that, whoa, I write these obits and people die. And oh my God, it was an amazing read. I loved it so much. So 5 stars. Book number 19, Drunken Fireworks, 4 stars. The plot had me enthralled, but it was not scary at all. Yes, this book was about these competing neighbors who live across the pond. I think that's kind of how it was described, because there's like a pond or a lake in between them. And it's literally drunken fireworks because it's about them competing to see who can have the better fireworks display on the 4th of July. And there is a consequence with a very disastrous result at the end with fireworks, but it wasn't scary, not at all. But I loved the sense of competition between both sides, going, I can outdo you, no, I can outdo you with these fireworks. Just, yeah. Fireworks are awesome here in Australia, but I don't think they're anywhere near as massive as they are in the US, especially on the 4th of July. So I can appreciate from an American writer where this story was coming from. The final book in the compendium is book number 20, Summer Thunder. I gave it 3 stars, and my only comment there is forgettable, and it is because I really don't remember what it's about at all, so it definitely is forgettable. So all in all, I appreciated these 20 works by Stephen King. I no longer think of him as a scary horror writer that makes me want to sleep with a light on at night, but more of a brilliant author who creates plots that the world needs to hear, however, should be categorized as contemporaries as far as I'm concerned. So all in all, this book did receive 3 stars from me. If you have read this book and you would like to tell me what you think, I would love to know. So please let me know in the comments below what you thought about these stories. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. Love to find out. I would strongly recommend that you read this book. Now, okay, I'm going to say something. While I was reading this book, I was kind of under the pump. There are other books I knew I needed to read after this, and so I had a target of a certain amount of pages that I need to read every day to try and get through this book in as quickly a manner as I could. But if you read for leisure, which I do most of the time, but these days I look at reading kind of as a job, and that's okay. I'm good with that. If you read for leisure and you buy or borrow from your library this book and you just read one mini story at a time and see how you go with it, just meander your way through it, I think you'll enjoy it. It really is a licorice all sorts pick and mix kind of book that, as you heard from the ratings I gave it, there are 1 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5-star books in this book. It really just depends on why you're there. Don't go into this book thinking this is a horror that's going to scare me, because some people told me that they couldn't sleep without the light on after reading this. I can. That is subjective to everyone's own personal experience, okay? I can't watch horror movies and sleep with the light on. It doesn't matter what horror movie it is, I can't do it. But with this book, I can. Go into this book thinking you're going to have a fun time reading some stories that Stephen King has written. Okay, that's what I would recommend. But all in all, 3-star book. Very much enjoyed it and can't wait to read my next book written by Stephen King, which you'll hear more about coming up very soon. Don't want to spoil it. But that's where we are going to leave that. So that is my review of Stephen King's The Bazaar Stories of Bad Dreams. Thank you so much for watching, letting you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and reviews and other things in between. Speaking of which, we have my midweek review coming up on Wednesday. We also have a fun video, the end of week video, the monthly wrap up to do, and at least 3 more reviews. So we have a lot of videos coming up this week, so stay tuned because there's a lot more coming your way. But in the meantime, mwah, thank you so much for watching, and regardless of whatever it is that you are reading, happy reading, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Mwah. Bye guys, bye!